Something is coming. On October 29th, the quiet rhythm of the cosmos shifts. A new traveler enters our solar system, moving with impossible precision through the dark. Astronomers call it 3I Atlas, the third interstellar object ever detected. But beyond that, almost nothing is certain. It does not behave like a comet. Its orbit is too sharp, its light too unstable, its silence too deliberate. Some say it's just a frozen wanderer, cast out from a dying star. Others whisper that it might be something far older, a fragment of purpose drifting through eternity, now brushing against our world for reasons we can't yet understand. Tonight, we stand at the edge of that mystery, because after October 29th, everything changes. What happens next could reveal not only the truth about 3I Atlas, but about the forces shaping life, time, and the unknown beyond our sky. Welcome to the Sleep Lab, where the universe never rests, and neither does curiosity. If you're drawn to the quiet side of cosmic wonder, subscribe, stay curious, and let's begin our journey into the mystery path of 3I Atlas. For weeks now, the telescopes have whispered the same story, a story that began as nothing more than a flicker in the dark. Somewhere beyond Neptune's orbit, a faint light moved against the steady rhythm of the stars. It was small, distant, and unremarkable until it wasn't. On that quiet night when data streamed across the monitors in a small Hawaiian observatory, something in the pattern broke the rules. Its path was wrong. Its speed was wrong. Even its silence, that eerie, unblinking calm of motion, felt unnatural. What they had captured wasn't just another comet or asteroid wandering through the void. It was a stranger, a visitor from somewhere far beyond our sun's reach. They named it 3I Atlas, the third known interstellar object ever discovered. To the public, that name sounds cold, almost mathematical. But to the astronomers watching the data pulse across their screens, it was poetry. Proof that the galaxy itself still speaks to us, that the infinite dark still sends us stories, carved in ice and fire. 3I Atlas wasn't born here. It came from the deep, from the gulf between stars where light itself seems to grow tired. It had traveled for millions, maybe billions of years before finding us, a lonely wanderer caught in our sun's gravity for a fleeting heartbeat of cosmic time. And yet, something about it didn't feel accidental. When the first images emerged, astronomers were puzzled. The object glowed, but not like an ordinary comet. Its brightness shifted without pattern. It had a tail, but the tail pointed toward the sun instead of away, as if defying the very forces that guide all others. They expected dust, vapor, and debris. Instead, they saw precision. Its motion through the solar wind was clean, steady, unhesitant. Even its reflections carried something odd, a faint bluish hue, shimmering like polished glass. Within days, the discovery spread across every major observatory on Earth. Telescopes from Chile, Spain, Japan, and California turned toward the same point in the sky. They tracked it as it accelerated, drifting closer to the inner solar system. And with every new observation came the same realization. 3I Atlas wasn't simply passing by. It was cutting through space, following a trajectory no natural body should follow. The night it was confirmed to be interstellar, the room fell silent. Astronomers have seen extraordinary things, the births of stars, the deaths of galaxies, but the idea of witnessing something not of this solar system touches a deeper kind of awe. Because every time one of these wanderers arrives, it carries secrets older than humanity itself. The last time we saw one like it was in 2019, 2I Borisov, a comet from another sun. And before that, the infamous Oumuamua, the mysterious shard that accelerated as if powered by something unseen. But this one was different. It was colder, quieter, more deliberate. As October drew near, scientists realized that October 29th would be the day, the moment of closest approach, when 3I Atlas would slip by our sun and reveal whatever secrets its surface might hide. To some, it was just another celestial event. To others, it felt like a countdown, a date that hung in the air like a warning. What happens after October 29? No one could answer. At the Mauna Kea Observatory in Hawaii, the night before the big observation, the air was still. The dome rotated in silence, tracking a point of light invisible to the naked eye. On the screen, the object was just a grain of white, flickering slightly like a heartbeat on a monitor. One of the researchers whispered, "It's breathing." The others laughed softly, but the remark stayed with them, because deep down, no one could quite explain the rhythm of that flicker. Across the world in Chile's Atacama Desert, instruments captured the first detailed spectra. The readings were strange. Too much cyanide, too little dust, and a composition that didn't match any comet catalogued before. Its core seemed unusually dense, almost metallic in places, with trace elements rarely found in interstellar ice. It was as if it had formed in an environment unlike any known star system, under pressures and temperatures we can't replicate. And the more they studied it, the less it resembled anything we've seen before. Its trajectory, too, was impossible to ignore. Unlike natural debris, which tends to wobble slightly from the influence of gravity, 3I Atlas moved like it was guided. The computer models predicted one curve, but the object followed another, bending space with a precision that made even seasoned astronomers uneasy. Was it gas pressure? Solar wind? Random physics? They checked, recalculated, rechecked again. The answer was always the same. It didn't add up. When Oumuamua was discovered in 2017, a few brave voices, including Harvard's Avi Loeb, dared to suggest that it might have been something artificial, perhaps a fragment of alien technology or a defunct probe. The world mocked the idea, but that same unease now crept into the conversation around 3I Atlas. Scientists avoided the word artificial this time, but in private many admitted they had no better explanation, and as the data piled up, public fascination ignited. Online forums filled with theories. Was it an alien artifact? A probe? A natural messenger? People tracked its position like a comet of prophecy. Some said it was harmless. Others swore it was a sign. You could almost feel the collective breath of humanity as October 29th approached. A quiet, shared awareness that something extraordinary was about to unfold above our heads. The night before its closest approach, a rare calm settled across observatories worldwide. The skies were clear, almost unnaturally so. As the Earth rotated into position, telescopes locked onto their target. For Atlas was now brighter than ever, glowing faintly blue-white like a frozen flame drifting across the stars. For a moment, the scientists forgot the equations, forgot the models, and just stared. Here in the infinite black was a visitor from another sun, a fragment of something older than the human race, moving with purpose and silence. Then, just after midnight, it happened. The object's brightness surged suddenly, a flash so brief that it barely lasted a fraction of a second, but strong enough to trigger every light sensor in range. Instruments recorded a sharp spike in energy, followed by an immediate return to normal. The observatories went quiet. Data analysts scrambled to confirm it wasn't a glitch. It wasn't. The flash was real, a pulse of energy that defied explanation. And then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. By dawn, 3. Atlas was still on course, but its path had shifted ever so slightly. Not much, just enough to raise questions. Had it expelled gas like a comet outburst? Had solar radiation warped its direction? Or had it responded to something, some unseen influence we couldn't measure? No one knew. But in that silence you could sense it, a feeling that something profound had just occurred, and no one could explain it. When scientists later examined the light curves, they found a repeating pattern buried in the data, a rhythmic pulse, faint but precise, repeating every 12 hours and 40 minutes. Coincidence, perhaps, or maybe not. The pattern was too regular, too intentional. Some dismissed it as data noise. Others couldn't shake the idea that they were looking at something deliberate, a transmission not in sound or radio, but in light. And still, through it all, 3I Atlas said nothing. It didn't slow down. It didn't deviate wildly. It didn't shatter or explode. It just kept moving, quiet, steady, perfect. Over the following days, as the object drifted farther from the sun, its glow began to fade. The blue tint dimmed, the tail shortened, and the light curve flattened. Within a week it was gone, slipping back into the interstellar dark from which it came, but its silence lingered. Even now, the astronomers reviewing their data speak of that night with a strange reverence. Some say it felt like watching a ghost. Others compare it to hearing a voice you can't quite make out, distant yet undeniably human. One researcher from the European Southern Observatory put it best: it was like being looked at by something vast and unblinking. Perhaps it's nothing, Perhaps it's everything. The story of Three-Eye Atlas isn't just about one object cutting across the sky. It's about the human condition, that desperate, endless longing to know what's out there. Every time we look up, we reach for meaning. We name the unnameable. We search for voices in the silence. And every so often, the universe answers, not with words, but with a flicker, a pulse, a whisper of movement across the void. Maybe Three-Eye Atlas is just a rock, a frozen shard of a forgotten world. Or maybe it's something far stranger. Maybe it's a message that doesn't use language, a story written in light and time passing by so quickly that we almost missed it. And if it is a message, then what is it trying to say? That we are not alone? That everything is connected? That even across the infinite darkness, something is watching us back? No one knows. And maybe that's the point. The universe doesn't give us answers. It gives us questions, questions that pull us upward into the stars. So now as Three-Eye Atlas fades into the endless dark, one truth remains. It came, it was seen, and it left us changed. It reminded us how small we are, how fragile, and how precious this brief spark of consciousness really is. Because somewhere, light years away, another world might be looking up right now, watching its own sky, wondering if something will one day arrive from our sun. And maybe, one day it will. The night grows still again. The telescopes turn away. The monitors go dark. But in the quiet heart of the cosmos, a blue fragment drifts onward, silent, steady, eternal. A messenger between worlds, a traveler from beyond. And though we may never know where it came from or why it came at all, one thing is certain. The path of Three-Eye Atlas has only just begun. The date had come and gone. October 29th, the night the world watched and waited, was now a shadow in memory. Yet for those who had traced every heartbeat of light from Three-Eye Atlas, it was only the beginning. Because what followed that night wasn't silence. It was transformation. Something had changed, not just in the data, not just in the sky, but in the feeling that swept through every observatory, every control room, every sleepless scientist staring at a blinking cursor on a monitor. The universe had whispered, and no one could quite tell what it had said. In the days after the encounter, Three-Eye Atlas moved into the next phase of its cosmic journey, past the point of closest approach, out toward the far edges of the solar system, and into regions where sunlight fades into nothingness. Yet, its trajectory no longer matched the one projected weeks earlier. A deviation, tiny, precise, impossible to explain. At first, astronomers blamed the usual suspects, outgassing, dust jets, or miscalculation. But the readings refused to align. Every model they ran, from gravitational dynamics to solar radiation drift, came up short. It wasn't just moving away, it was steering away. No one wanted to use that word aloud. Steering. It sounded too human, too deliberate, too alive. At the European Southern Observatory, Dr. Kessler sat in front of her monitor long past midnight, comparing trajectories. Her colleagues had gone home, leaving only the soft hum of the servers and the occasional rustle of paper. The new path was subtle, just a fraction of a degree difference, but at interstellar speeds it meant everything. "It shouldn't be doing this," she muttered under her breath, drawing the line again, zooming in until the pixels blurred. "It shouldn't be doing this." Outside, the desert wind howled across the dry plateau. Inside, the telescope kept its unblinking watch. The object was fading now, too dim for the naked eye even through large instruments, and yet its data spoke, in intervals, in pulses, in secrets. Every 12 hours and 40 minutes a fluctuation appeared in its brightness, the same rhythmic pulse first noticed during the flyby. No one had confirmed what caused it, but it persisted, like a heartbeat echoing through vacuum. Some said it was coincidence. Others whispered that it was something more, a signal from the void. As November began, observatories around the globe collaborated to reconstruct the timeline of the event. What exactly happened during the approach? What had caused that sudden flash of light on October 29th? The data was overwhelming. Fragments from dozens of telescopes, each offering a different angle, wavelength, or moment in time. When combined, they painted a picture that defied logic. The flash wasn't random. It occurred precisely when Three-Eye Atlas crossed a magnetic boundary in the solar wind, a thin, invisible line where the sun's influence wanes and the interstellar medium begins. At that moment, the object released a burst of energy equivalent to a small explosion, yet without the debris, without the heat signature, without the natural chaos of destruction. It was clean, instantaneous, controlled. What if, one researcher asked quietly during a debrief, it wasn't an accident? The room fell silent. There's a kind of quiet that exists in science, the kind that follows when logic runs out and wonder takes over. That was the silence that filled the conference halls and data labs in the days after the flash. People who had devoted their lives to cold, rational physics now stared at their screens and felt something different. A chill, a thrill. They sensed that perhaps, just perhaps, if the universe was not as indifferent as they had always believed. By mid-November, 3 Mayae Atlas was leaving the inner solar system. The sun's light no longer defined its glow. It was dimming, vanishing into the black. But even as it disappeared, its legacy deepened. Amateur astronomers continued to track it obsessively, their small backyard telescopes catching faint streaks of light. Each night they posted updates online, grainy photos, theories, predictions. And in between those lines of data, humanity's imagination ignited. Some called it an alien probe, sent to map the civilizations it passed. Others believed it was a cosmic seed, drifting through galaxies, carrying the building blocks of life. And a few thought it was something else entirely, a warning. The scientists ignored the noise as they always did. But privately they couldn't stop thinking about it either. Because the truth was, Twice Atlas was still changing. In late November, a small observatory in Norway reported something strange. Using deep infrared imaging, they detected residual heat signatures near the object's trajectory. Faint, scattered traces where no light should exist. It wasn't enough to classify as radiation, but it was there, a thermal echo that didn't match any natural explanation. When cross-checked with readings from Japan's Subaru telescope, the anomaly repeated. A new hypothesis emerged. Maybe 3I Atlas wasn't a solid object at all, but a hollow shell or cluster of fragments bound by some internal force. Some even speculated it was a vessel of some kind, carrying something unseen across space. Everywhere questions multiplied faster than answers. If it came from another system, which one? If it traveled for millions of years, why now? And above all, what happens next? By December, a group of astrophysicists released what they called the Atlas projection, a predictive model charting 3I Atlas's next 200 years of travel. The model showed a strange thing. Its exit path was not random. Instead of following a chaotic ejection curve like most interstellar debris, it seemed to be aligning, straightening, toward a specific galactic coordinate. A point far beyond our sun, in the direction of the constellation Lyra. To anyone else it meant nothing, but to astronomers it was electrifying. Lyra was where Oumuamua had come from. 2 interstellar visitors, separated by years, appearing to trace the same invisible path across the galaxy. Coincidence or connection? The deeper they looked, the more questions emerged. Was there a stream of interstellar debris passing through our region of space? A galactic current carrying fragments from one dying system to another? Or were these travelers part of something greater, pieces of a network too vast for us to see? In the public sphere, the news sparked both fascination and fear. Talk shows speculated about alien origin theories. Documentaries promised revelations. Conspiracy forums lit up with countdowns and apocalyptic predictions. The object is not leaving, one viral post claimed. It's repositioning. The truth, however, was quieter and far stranger. On December 7th, 3I Atlas crossed the heliopause, the boundary where the solar wind meets true interstellar space. Beyond that, sunlight fades. Space becomes colder, darker, emptier than anything we can imagine. For most comets, that's the end of the story. They fall silent, frozen in eternal drift. But as the object crossed that threshold, instruments detected something new. A faint radio pulse. It lasted less than a second. Too weak to classify as communication. Too structured to ignore. It wasn't coming from Earth. It wasn't from any known satellite or probe. It came from the object itself. After that, the pulse never repeated. But in that moment, one fleeting signal from the edge of the sun's reach, everything changed. Astronomers analyzed it relentlessly. Was it interference? Cosmic noise? A statistical fluke? Maybe. But the pattern was hauntingly clean. a narrow-band frequency centered precisely between natural hydrogen lines, the kind of wavelength often used by scientists to search for extraterrestrial intelligence. If it was a coincidence, it was the most poetic one imaginable. The press never heard about the signal. The data was logged, classified, and quietly archived. The official statement described it as instrumental noise, but among those who had seen it, those who knew the exact coordinates, time and amplitude, the story spread in whispers. What if, someone asked, it wasn't just passing through? What if it was listening? By January, the object was gone, too far for any telescope to follow, too dim for any instrument to detect. The Atlas had vanished back into the sea of stars, a ripple fading in the black ocean of space. But for those who had witnessed its passage, life didn't quite return to normal even now. When the night is clear and the stars burn sharp against the sky, some scientists still find themselves looking up, wondering where it is, what it saw, and whether it remembers us. The cosmic timeline didn't end on October 29th. It began there, in that instant, when a silent fragment from another world brushed against our reality, then slipped away, leaving only questions behind, because maybe October 29th wasn't a date at all. Maybe it was a door that opened, if only for a moment, between what we know and what we fear to imagine. And perhaps that's the real mystery of Three-Eye Atlas. Not what it was, but why it came now. Why among infinite stars and infinite years, this visitor chose our sky and our time, our fragile little world, to reveal itself. As winter settled over the northern hemisphere, a handful of observatories kept watching long after the object disappeared. They weren't expecting to see it again. They were waiting but for something else. Another signal, another flicker, another messenger. Because if Three-Eye Atlas had truly followed the same path as Oumuamua, then this was only the second chapter of a story far larger than we realize. And somewhere out there, beyond the heliopause, past the reach of the sun's warmth, a cold blue shard continues its journey, unblinking, unstoppable, carrying the quiet secrets of the stars from which it came. Humanity called it a comet, an asteroid, a fragment of dust, but maybe one day when we finally understand, we'll call it what it really was, the beginning of contact. Until then, it drifts through eternity, following its mysterious path, the same path that began after October 29th, the path of Three-Eye Atlas. Every mystery in science begins with a single question. Where did it come from? And when it came to Three-Eye Atlas, that question was more than curiosity. It was obsession. For months, astronomers traced its path backward, running complex simulations through supercomputers, trying to find the point where its story began. They expected the usual, a fading trajectory dispersing into statistical noise. But this time the numbers refused to fade. Instead, they pointed towards something strange, a direction deep within the constellation Lyra. At first, that meant little. Lyra is a patch of sky filled with young stars, old remnants, and clouds of gas stretching across light years. But it held one name that sent a quiet chill through the scientific community. Vega, one of the brightest and most studied stars in our galaxy, only 25 light-years from Earth. Vega had long fascinated astronomers. It was beautiful, luminous and surrounded by a mysterious debris disk, fragments of dust and ice believed to be the remains of planets that once were. And now, the data suggested something impossible. Three-Eye Atlas might have come from there. The first person to notice the correlation was Dr. Li, a celestial dynamics researcher in Beijing. She was cross-referencing velocity vectors when the numbers aligned with Vega's motion through the galaxy. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked the calculations again. "No," she whispered, "it can't be, but it could." The math was too precise to ignore. If true, it meant that the object had been traveling toward us for nearly 1 million years. That's how long it would take a fragment ejected from the Vega system to cross the space between our stars. 1 million years of cold drift, through silence, through radiation storms, through the endless emptiness of the interstellar sea, until, by chance or fate, it found us. But Vega wasn't supposed to send visitors. It was a young star surrounded by dust, not old enough to have stable planetary systems. So how did a solid, coherent object like Three-Eye Atlas come from there? What kind of event had launched it into space? The simplest explanation was catastrophic, a planetary collision. Two massive bodies smashing together with unimaginable force, hurling debris into the void. Over eons, one fragment escaped its home's gravity and began its long voyage here. But even that didn't quite fit. The object's composition, the metallic traces, the symmetrical core, hinted at precision, not chaos. It didn't look like a random piece of rock. It looked designed. The deeper scientists searched, the stranger the origin became. Vega wasn't the only suspect. Another theory placed the point of ejection near a dim, dying red dwarf known as Gliese 710, a rogue star slowly drifting toward our solar system, expected to pass dangerously close in the next million years. Some speculated that 3I Atlas could be a relic from Gliese's past, a remnant from a destroyed planetary system, a warning from a civilization erased by its sun's final flare. And then came the third possibility, one that bordered on myth. A few researchers suggested that the object's true source wasn't a specific star at all, but a route, a kind of cosmic current through which interstellar debris travels, guided by invisible magnetic fields. In this theory, 3I Atlas wasn't launched from a world, but caught in a stream, part of a river of matter that flows across the galaxy like an ancient trade route, carrying fragments of worlds long lost. If that was true, then 3I Atlas wasn't a lone traveler. It was part of something vast, a migration of objects moving silently between the stars, connecting systems in ways we're only beginning to understand. But no model could fully explain its composition. When infrared data revealed trace metals beneath the surface, titanium, nickel, and silicates fused in crystalline lattices, scientists realized something unsettling. This wasn't the signature of a natural body. It looked processed, smelted, altered by heat far beyond what any comet or asteroid could endure. Some began to whisper what everyone feared to say out loud. What if, they asked, it didn't just come from a world? What if it was made by one? The theory ignited quiet chaos in the academic world. Officially, no one entertained it. But behind closed doors, researchers ran secret models, testing artificial structures, hollow geometries, density ratios. The numbers fit too well. 3I Atlas's mass-to-volume ratio suggested a hollow core, perhaps even a shell, and its slow rotation matched the stability you'd expect from a balanced design, not a random rock tumbling through the void. When an article leaked onto a private astronomy forum claiming the object could be engineered, it spread faster than any scientific paper in history. Within hours, it had been deleted, archived, denied. But it was too late. The idea had escaped. Was it possible that 3I Atlas was a relic, a derelict object built by a civilization we'll never meet? Maybe it wasn't a probe or a ship, but something simpler. A fragment of a lost structure, drifting endlessly after its creators were gone. Like a broken cathedral floating in the dark. And then one question emerged, soft but devastating. If they built it, what happened to them? That question haunted people in ways data never could. Because the cosmos is full of ghosts. Dead stars, extinct planets, signals lost in static. And now maybe one of those ghosts had crossed into our home. Somewhere. Millions of years ago, something might have happened, a war, a collapse, a dying sun, forcing its people to look outward, to send something into the dark. Perhaps a warning, perhaps a record, perhaps hope. Every culture on Earth has told the same story, that of messages cast into the sea. Bottles carrying words, prayers, or memories tossed into the waves, hoping someone somewhere will find them. Maybe 3I Atlas was the universe's version of that. A message in a bottle, except this bottle traveled between stars. In December, Dr. Kessler from the European team wrote a quiet entry in her research log. We spend our lives searching for noise in the silence, but maybe it was never meant to be loud. Maybe this is how the universe speaks, not with words but with presence. Her words spread quietly among the team, whispered during late nights at the observatory. Because what haunted them most wasn't the data. It was the feeling that this discovery carried weight, as if it had been meant to be seen. The mystery of 3I Atlas's origin wasn't just about astrophysics anymore. It had become something personal, a mirror held up to human longing. We look for beginnings because we're terrified of endings. We map the stars because we're desperate to know we're not alone in the dark. And yet, perhaps the real lesson of 3I Atlas is that we are part of that darkness too. That maybe somewhere in the deep cosmic past, Another species looked up at their own sky, just as we do, and wondered who was out there, never knowing that a million years later, a fragment of their world would pass silently through ours. The puzzle remains unsolved. Every new model contradicts the last. Vega, Gliese, the cosmic current, none of them explain it fully. It's as though 3i Atlas deliberately erased its own trail, leaving just enough evidence to remind us that it had one. A mystery carved in motion, and as it vanishes now into the deep interstellar night, we are left with only fragments of truth, light curves, temperature graphs, coordinates, and one lingering feeling that defies science, the sense that something ancient has just passed by, and that we were meant to notice. Maybe 3i Atlas wasn't a messenger at all. Maybe it was a memory of a world that no longer exists. A reminder that creation and destruction are not opposites. They are partners in an endless cosmic dance. And perhaps that's why it came, to remind us that one day, we too will send our fragments into the void. That one day, something from Earth will drift through another system, silent and unrecognizable, and someone else will ask the same question we are asking now: where did it come from? There are moments in science when numbers stop making sense, when the data that should reveal truth instead deepens the mystery. The story of 3i Atlas entered that phase soon after its departure, when telescopes continued collecting light curves and readings from its vanishing trail. What they found didn't belong to any category of known physics. It was as if nature itself had bent the rules for one fleeting visitor. In theory, the study of an interstellar object is simple. You observe, you measure, and you explain. But as the months passed, 3i Atlas began to behave like an equation with too many variables. Every solved piece revealed two new contradictions. Its brightness curve, for instance, pulsed with a rhythm that no comet or asteroid had ever displayed. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. It was a pattern, faint, deliberate, repeating with uncanny precision, like the ticking of a distant clock lost in the void. Scientists called it the light anomaly. To the public, it was a curiosity. To the researchers who spent sleepless nights staring at the data, it was something far more haunting, a sign that the object was not just drifting through the solar system, but responding to it. At the Deep Space Array in New Mexico, the first inconsistencies appeared during data synchronization. Every time the telescopes recalibrated to account for Earth's rotation, the object's light seemed to shift before the correction took effect, as if it somehow anticipated their movement. "It's like it knows we're looking," one technician joked nervously. Laughter followed, but beneath it lay unease. The official explanation was optical interference. The unofficial truth was that no one could explain it. As the analysis deepened, things only grew stranger. A graduate student at MIT noticed something buried within the raw readings. Subtle fluctuations, not just in brightness, but in spectrum. The wavelengths changed ever so slightly, forming patterns that almost resembled encoded data. It wasn't language, not in any sense we understand, but it had structure, repetition, symmetry, timing. The kind of thing found in systems, not chaos. She showed the data to her supervisor, expecting to be dismissed. Instead, he went silent. The next day, that section of the data set was locked behind restricted access, marked classified collaboration material. When questioned, NASA's official response was that the irregularities were due to sensor recalibration, but many of those who had seen the readings never forgot what they saw. An interstellar object whose light seemed to speak. By January, the global astronomy community was fractured. On one side were the skeptics, those who believed every anomaly had a natural cause, gas release, reflection, cosmic dust. On the other side were the quiet believers, those who suspected 3i Atlas might be something we weren't ready to understand. At a closed-door symposium in Geneva, a heated argument broke out between two researchers. One insisted the object's acceleration could be explained by asymmetric outgassing, tiny jets of vapor propelling it like a comet. The other slammed his hand on the table. "That theory works for comets with visible tails," he said, "but this thing didn't have one." Silence filled the room. Everyone knew he was right. The Atlas had defied every category. It glowed like a comet, but moved like a spacecraft. It spun slowly, perfectly balanced as though guided by an invisible gyroscope. And when it passed the sun, instead of slowing down, it accelerated, a direct violation of Newtonian expectation. Where did that extra push come from? The sun's radiation pressure couldn't account for it. No gravitational slingshot explained it. It was, simply put, motion without cause, an object that moved itself. In the weeks that followed, labs across the world began to compare notes. Some of the data didn't match, not just in measurement but in reality. Observatories located thousands of miles apart recorded slightly different readings of the same moment, as though 3-eye atlas appeared differently depending on where you observed it from. It was a small discrepancy, less than 0.3% variance, but enough to drive mathematicians mad. Relativity could explain part of it, but the rest remained beyond even Einstein's reach. One physicist proposed a radical theory, that the object wasn't just reflecting light, it was bending it. If 3-eye atlas possessed a highly reflective crystalline surface or magnetic field, it could distort the light that hit it, creating false readings. Another argued that the distortion was gravitational, that the object's density was so extreme that it warped the space around it ever so slightly. But that would require a mass comparable to a small moon, which it clearly didn't have. So what was it? The simplest answer was the one no one wanted to speak aloud: we don't know. Yet not knowing didn't stop the fascination. Late-night podcasts and documentaries speculated endlessly. Could it be a probe? Was it observing us? Did we miss a message? But the scientists weren't amused. The unknown is not comforting, it's corrosive. It eats at sleep, erodes certainty, and whispers that perhaps the universe isn't as knowable as we like to believe. Inside the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, a group of researchers began running artificial signal analysis on the light anomaly. Using algorithms designed for radio astronomy, they searched for intentional modulation. Any sign that the brightness changes carried information. After weeks of processing, they found something that chilled the entire lab: a recurring harmonic ratio embedded in the fluctuation pattern, identical to the golden ratio found throughout natural and human-made structures. Coincidence, perhaps? But in a universe governed by entropy, such symmetry is rare and rarely meaningless. One researcher wrote in his notes, "We are taught that the universe has no intention. But what if intention doesn't require life? What if somewhere physics itself remembers how to speak?" Outside the scientific circles, the story took on a life of its own. People began to gather at observatories, holding vigils under the stars. Artists painted it as a glowing eye drifting through the heavens. Poets called it the messenger of silence. For a world drowning in noise, 3-eye atlas had become a symbol of wonder, of fear, of the fragile line between what we can explain and what we cannot. But behind the poetry, the unease remained. In February, the last signal was received, a data burst from a deep space telescope in the Canary Islands. It captured something never seen before, a spectral echo from the object's wake. Not light, not radiation, but something new. A faint distortion pattern that resembled quantum interference. When filtered, it revealed an image so subtle that most dismissed it as artifact. A ring. Thin, perfect, glowing faintly within the data's noise. No one could reproduce it. No one could disprove it. It existed only for one moment, in one set of readings, before vanishing forever. And perhaps that's how the universe hides its greatest truths, not behind locked doors, but in flashes too brief to catch, in data too strange to fit our understanding. Even now, years later, 3-eye atlas remains a paradox. Every answer leads to another question. Every theory collapses beneath its own logic. It is a ghost written in numbers, haunting the space between certainty and belief. The more scientists tried to define it, the more it slipped away, as if it was never meant to be solved, only witnessed. Maybe that's the real mystery of 3-eye atlas. Not that it defied physics, but that it forced us to confront our limits. To realize that despite all our instruments, we still see only a fraction of the truth, and maybe somewhere in that fraction, the universe is whispering, "You are not meant to know everything, because if knowledge is light, then mystery is the shadow it casts." And perhaps somewhere far beyond our reach, 3i Atlas continues to drift through both, half seen, half hidden, a reminder that even in an age of data, wonder still lives in what science cannot explain. In the sterile quiet of observatories, data speaks without sound, numbers flashing on monitors, graphs pulsing faintly like heartbeats. But beyond the screens, beyond the hum of telescopes and computer fans, there was a tremor that no instrument could measure. It was human, a quiet, collective unease spreading across the world. 3i Atlas had left its mark not just on the night sky, but on the minds of those who dared to watch it too closely. When the news first broke, it felt like a miracle, a traveler from another star, a visitor crossing the infinite dark to brush past our sun. It should have been a story of wonder, the kind that unites humanity under one sky. But as more data arrived, flashes of light, impossible motion, unexplainable pulses, wonder began to twist into something heavier. A question, a feeling, a fear. What if this thing wasn't just passing through? At first, the scientists kept their distance, professionally, emotionally. They were trained to separate awe from analysis. Yet something about 3i Atlas pierced that barrier. For months they had tracked its movements, predicted its path, dissected its light. But now, as the data grew stranger and the theories collapsed, the boundary between curiosity and dread blurred. Dr. Kessler, who had once spoken of 3i Atlas as a gift from the cosmos, began to avoid interviews. When pressed, she only said, "It's more complex than we expected." In her private notebook, she wrote something different. It doesn't make sense that something can behave as though it's aware of being seen. In the sleepless nights that followed, many shared that same thought, unspoken, but deeply felt. The media, as always, found its own language for mystery. Headlines screamed across digital screens. Interstellar object shows signs of intelligent control. Alien probe or natural wonder? The universe sends a signal. Scientists stunned. The story spiraled, part science, part superstition. Anchors spoke in tones of awe. Podcasters filled hours with speculation. Animations of 3i Atlas glowing like a celestial eye looped endlessly on social feeds. Everyone had an opinion, yet no one had certainty. And that absence of certainty, that vacuum, began to pull the world into its gravity. In Tokyo, people gathered on rooftops with binoculars, whispering prayers to the blue streak they couldn't even see. In Chile, families camped beneath the cold desert sky, waiting for one last glimpse. Across Europe, church bells rang at sunset, their tolls mingling with the hum of the telescopes that pointed upward. For the first time in decades, humanity was looking at the same thing together, but not in celebration. In wonder and in quiet fear, governments reacted differently. While the public saw mystery, officials saw risk. Behind closed doors, meetings were held in urgency. The Pentagon, ESA, and Roscosmos exchanged encrypted files marked restricted, celestial surveillance. They weren't talking about aliens. Not yet. They were talking about the implications. What if 3i Atlas altered its course again? What if it wasn't a fragment, but a craft? What if it came from intelligence beyond our comprehension? No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone in those rooms was thinking the same word. Contact. The world had protocols for war, disaster, and disease, but not for this. The old SETI guidelines written decades ago suddenly resurfaced. They had seemed theoretical then, almost romantic. Now they read like prophecy. Do not transmit. Do not reply. Do not provoke. For the first time, humanity stared at something vast, silent and unknown, and chose silence in return. But silence does strange things to people. It amplifies imagination. It makes the ordinary tremble with significance. At a university in Berlin, a group of philosophy students held an overnight vigil they called the Night of Listening. They sat in a dark lecture hall, watching a live projection of 3i Atlas's fading path. No music, no talking. Just the hum of the earth and the feeling that maybe in that silence, something out there might be listening back. In New York, a poet stood in Central Park beneath a canopy of skyscrapers and read aloud, "If it came to see us, let it know we were looking." And somewhere in a small observatory in the Australian outback, a retired radio engineer stayed awake until dawn, tuning an old shortwave receiver through endless static, whispering, "If you're out there, Say something, but nothing came, only the pulse. That faint, measured flicker of light that refused to die. It wasn't loud enough to be a message, not clear enough to decode, but too deliberate to ignore. The world divided into two beliefs. Some said 3 Atlas was proof that we are not alone, a cosmic letter delivered across light years. Others said it was a mirror, reflecting not intelligence but our own longing to find meaning in the unknown. In time, both sides would be right. For scientists, the emotional toll was immense. Many described it as standing on the edge of understanding, only to realize the ground beneath them didn't exist. They spoke of insomnia, of dreaming about the object, of waking in the middle of the night to check the tracking data one more time. It became personal, not just a discovery but a haunting. Dr. Lee, who had traced its origin to Vega, later confessed in an interview, "I used to believe science could explain everything. Now I'm not sure it should." Her words resonated far beyond the academic world, because 3i Atlas wasn't just a scientific event, it was psychological. It forced humanity to look up and confront the possibility that we're not the center of the story, that maybe in the grand silence of the universe, we are the ones being studied, not the other way around. Then came the art, paintings, films, poems, songs. In every culture, the object found new meaning. Some saw it as a symbol of hope, a cosmic reminder that life endures. Others saw warning, the harbinger of something vast and unstoppable. It became myth before it even left our skies. One image in particular spread across the internet, a digital rendering of 3i Atlas drifting above a burning Earth, half blue, half shadow. The caption read, "They came to see what we've become. It wasn't real, but it felt true. The world was tired, divided by war, noise, endless argument." For a moment, 3i Atlas reminded humanity that there were still things bigger than ourselves, things that couldn't be owned, named, or explained. For some, that brought peace. For others, panic. On the night of its final visibility, crowds gathered in cities around the world. Some held candles, others held phones to the sky. Many simply stood in silence. The moment felt sacred, though no religion could claim it. Above them, invisible to most, the object continued on, a faint glimmer against infinity. When it finally vanished, telescopes fell quiet. But humanity did not. For weeks after, people reported strange feelings, a sense of emptiness, a pull to the stars, dreams filled with drifting light. Psychologists called it cosmic grief, the emotional aftershock of witnessing something so extraordinary that ordinary life suddenly felt smaller. And perhaps that's the true measure of the human response. Not the science we discovered, but the humility it forced upon us. 3i Atlas reminded us that we are still explorers, children staring into an ocean we barely understand. That even in an age of satellites and algorithms, a single unknown can still make the whole world stop and listen. In the end, the object left behind no crash, no contact, no destruction. Only questions. And maybe that was the point all along. Because sometimes the universe doesn't want to scare us or comfort us. Sometimes it just wants us to remember how it feels to wonder. And that perhaps was 3i Atlas's greatest gift. Not answers, but awe. A reminder that curiosity itself is sacred. That mystery still exists in a world desperate to explain everything. So long after the telescopes turned away, the memory of it lingered, not in the sky, but in us. In the late-night thoughts of scientists who still stare upward, in the whispered prayers of those who saw something divine, in the quiet belief that maybe, somewhere, someone once sent a fragment into the dark, hoping it would find a mind capable of seeing it. And on October 29th, it did. The further 3i Atlas drifted into the dark, the quieter the world became. It was gone. The light had faded. The data had slowed to silence, yet its shadow lingered in human thought like the echo of a dream. Scientists moved on to new projects. Observatories returned to routine, but somewhere in every person who had watched the sky that autumn, a single question still pulsed like an afterimage. What did it mean? Because 3i Atlas wasn't just a discovery, it was a mirror. One that reflected not the stars but us. Its arrival had shaken the foundations of certainty. We had measured its orbit, catalogued its light, debated its nature. But for all our instruments and algorithms, something about it remained beyond comprehension. as though it existed partly outside the reach of reason. And that realization changed people. It softened arrogance, blurred boundaries, and whispered an ancient truth: that the universe is not ours to master, only to witness. In the quiet aftermath, philosophers, scientists, and poets began to speak a common language again, a language of awe. Dr. Lee wrote in her journal, "We thought we were studying it. But perhaps it was studying us, not through intent but through consequence. How we react to the unknown reveals who we are more than what we learn from it." Her words struck a chord. For months, conferences and papers discussed not what 3i Atlas was, but what it showed us about ourselves. The debates grew less technical, more spiritual. What does it mean when something from another star passes through ours? Is it random, or is it part of a greater cosmic pattern, one we're too young to read? To understand that question, humanity turned inward, not to telescopes but to perspective. We realized how small we are. To not metaphorically and literally, our entire solar system from Mercury to Neptune is a pinprick in the Milky Way, and 3i Atlas crossed it in less than a year. Think about that. An object from another sun traveled for 1,000,000 years to pass through our home for a few fleeting weeks, like a gust of wind through an open window. And in that moment, the world stopped to look. The scale is humbling, but the beauty lies in that pause. For once, our species, scattered, conflicted, endlessly loud, looked up together and shared silence. No borders, no divisions, no politics. Just a single awareness that something greater than us exists. Religions reacted in their own ways. Some saw it as a sign, proof of creation's vastness. Others as a reminder that the divine may speak not through words but through wonder. Monks in Tibet lit lanterns for the traveler between suns. In cathedrals across Europe, choirs sang hymns for the messenger of light. Even skeptics, those grounded firmly in science, found themselves whispering questions that sounded suspiciously like prayers. Because if the universe is filled with such precision, objects crossing billions of miles only to appear in our skies for a brief, meaningful instant, then perhaps randomness isn't chaos at all. Perhaps it's designed too complex for us to see. In universities, a new field of thought began to emerge: cosmic anthropology. Its scholars didn't study alien life, but cosmic behavior itself, the patterns of the universe as if they were stories written in motion. They asked, could interstellar objects like 3i Atlas be part of a communication system that operates beyond our comprehension? Not language, not symbols, but action. After all, in physics, motion is message. Gravity speaks, light travels, particles react. Every movement in space tells a story about everything it has ever touched. What if 3i Atlas was simply part of that, a single phrase in the language of the cosmos? Meanwhile, the public fascination evolved from fear to reflection. The hashtags faded, the headlines died. But a quieter form of attention remained. A curiosity turned inward. Documentaries began to sound less like thrillers and more like meditations. What if, one narrator said, 3i Atlas didn't come to show us something new, but to remind us of something ancient? For centuries, humanity has chased the idea that we are separate, from nature, from the universe, from one another. But perhaps the visitor had come to undo that illusion, because when you watch something cross the stars and vanish, you start to understand impermanence in a way no philosophy can teach. You realize that everything, from comets to civilizations, is just passing through. We too are travelers moving through time, leaving traces that one day someone else might study, wonder about, or misinterpret, and that realization changes everything. By spring, a small group of astrophysicists gathered in the mountains of Chile to hold what they called the Reflection Summit. It wasn't official. There were no presentations, no equations, just conversation and stars. On the second night, one scientist asked, what if the universe is alive, not in the biological sense, but in awareness? What if it notices us as much as we notice it? No one laughed. No one disagreed, because deep down everyone there had felt it. That strange awareness while watching 3i Atlas pass. The sensation that the universe itself had leaned closer for a moment, like an ancient being blinking once before returning to sleep. Maybe that's what awe truly is. Not fear of the unknown, but recognition. A brief alignment between human consciousness and cosmic rhythm. A whisper that says, you belong here even if you don't understand why. the deeper implications reached beyond science, philosophy, or faith. They touched something primal, the idea that we might be part of a story too vast to perceive. If Three-Eye Atlas was a messenger, perhaps its message wasn't for our minds, but for our species. Maybe its purpose was to remind us of the responsibility that comes with awareness, the fragile privilege of being able to look up and wonder, because every civilization that has ever looked to the stars has eventually asked the same question: are we alone? And maybe the answer is this: we were never alone, only unaware. Perhaps the universe has always been alive with travelers like Three-Eye Atlas, fragments, signals, remnants, carrying not greetings or warnings, but reflections of existence itself. Maybe everything that drifts through space, from comets to dust to forgotten satellites, participates in that grand cosmic dialogue. And maybe, for the first time, humanity heard it. Years later, long after the visitor had vanished, the data was still studied, debated, and questioned. But for those who had been there, who had lived through the nights of its observation, the data no longer mattered as much as the feeling it left behind. A quiet humility. A renewed hunger for truth. A sense that the stars were no longer distant, but near, woven into us like memory. Children who grew up hearing about Three-Eye Atlas began studying astronomy. Artists painted galaxies as though they were souls, and scientists once content to measure began to wonder again. In a late interview, Dr. Kessler summarized it best. "Eye Atlas may not have been alive, but it awakened something that was asleep, in us." Her words became legend, quoted in documentaries, inscribed on observatory walls, whispered in classrooms. Because what she said was true. The object didn't just pass through the solar system. It passed through human consciousness. It reminded us that science and spirituality were never enemies. They were two ways of reaching for the same thing: meaning. And that perhaps the greatest discovery of all is not finding life beyond Earth, but rediscovering life within ourselves. So now when astronomers point their telescopes to the sky, they still search for light, but with a different kind of hope. Not for proof, not for conquest, but for connection. They know that somewhere, far beyond the reach of human sight, a silent traveler still moves through the void, carrying the story of our encounter, written not in language, but in trajectory. Its path has become legend, a thread woven into the fabric of human history. Because Three-Eye Atlas didn't just change what we know, it changed who we are. And maybe in some distant future, when another civilization finds one of our fragments drifting through their skies, they'll feel the same pulse of awe, the same ache of wonder, and whisper the same question we did: what does it mean? The universe, for all its silence, never fails to provoke whispers. When Three-Eye Atlas vanished into the dark beyond Neptune, it left behind not closure but a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. In the months that followed, that emptiness filled with theories. Some were scientific, others were desperate, and a few were terrifying. It began quietly, in late-night discussions between physicists who no longer trusted their own equations. There were patterns in the data that refused to fit natural explanations. The light fluctuations, the acceleration, the impossible balance of its rotation. Every detail hinted at something deeper than coincidence, something deliberate. What if, they asked, we're seeing the fingerprints of forces we don't yet understand? The first major theory came from a young astrophysicist in Prague, who dared to connect Three-Eye Atlas to the mysterious field of dark matter interactions. Her hypothesis was simple and radical. What if Three-Eye Atlas wasn't moving unnaturally, but was being moved? We know dark matter makes up nearly 85% of the universe's mass, yet it's invisible, untouchable, detectable only by its gravity. But what if, in rare circumstances, dark matter could interact with physical objects? Could it create invisible currents like cosmic rivers that pull objects along? If so, Three-Eye Atlas might have been caught in one. Not self-propelled, not guided, but carried. It would mean our galaxy is alive with unseen tides, pushing ancient fragments through space like leaves floating on invisible streams. The idea was dismissed at first, too speculative, too abstract. But when computational simulations showed that such currents could, in theory, explain the object's sudden acceleration near the sun, the laughter stopped. For the first time, physicists had to consider the impossible. Maybe 3i Atlas wasn't breaking the laws of physics. Maybe it was obeying laws we haven't discovered yet. But that was only one theory. Others emerged, stranger still. In Cambridge, a group of researchers working with gravitational wave data proposed that 3i Atlas's path corresponded to subtle ripples in space-time, distortions left behind by distant supernovae or collapsing stars. They noticed a faint synchronization. Every time the object shifted direction, a minor gravitational echo appeared in nearby data, almost imperceptible, like a string being plucked across the fabric of reality. Coincidence? Or could 3i Atlas have been drawn to these ripples, following them the way migratory birds follow Earth's magnetic lines? If that were true, it meant something extraordinary. That interstellar objects might navigate the cosmos using the structure of space-time itself, surfing on the gravitational waves of dying stars. One scientist described it poetically. Perhaps it's not a visitor, but a pilgrim, traveling from one death of a star to another, carrying memory between them. That idea haunted people more than any scientific explanation could, because if that was true, then 3i Atlas wasn't just a rock or a relic. It was part of the universe's mourning process, a particle of remembrance drifting between the graves of suns. Of course, not all speculations stayed within the walls of academia. As the mystery deepened, the world outside began to fill in the blanks with its own mythology. Some claimed it was an ancient mechanism, a machine from a forgotten civilization, still running on autopilot, long after its makers were gone. They pointed to the geometric perfection of its rotation, the pulse-like rhythm of its light, and the strange electromagnetic interference it caused in distant instruments. Online forums exploded with debates. Was it a probe? A warning, a seed of something larger. One theory suggested it wasn't alone, that multiple objects like 3i Atlas were already moving through our galaxy, forming a silent network of celestial markers, each tracing invisible coordinates in space. Together they could map a design too vast to comprehend, perhaps a cosmic pattern, a message written not in symbols but in orbits. Others went even further. They called it a cosmic archive, a wandering library of dust and metal, storing information about every world it passed. Like spores of memory, drifting between the stars, carrying the stories of civilizations that never survived long enough to speak to each other. If that idea sounds poetic, it's because it is. But sometimes, poetry comes closer to truth than equations do. Meanwhile, deep in the mountains of Chile, a private observatory continued to track 3i Atlas long after the official networks had stopped. One night, the team recorded something faint, a low-frequency signal just above the cosmic background noise. It wasn't a sound, not in the traditional sense. It was a pattern of resonance. Like two frequencies colliding in perfect harmony, they replayed it dozens of times. It wasn't artificial, but it wasn't random either. When converted into audible form, the signal produced a tone that rose and fell in cycles of 3. The scientists nicknamed it the breath. It sounded almost alive, and as though the universe itself were exhaling through the object. No official body ever confirmed the data, and the recording was eventually lost in a system wipe during a database migration. But those who heard it never forgot. One of them, years later, said quietly, "It was like listening to something that had been asleep for a very long time." Among philosophers and theologians, a quieter but deeper speculation began to take shape, one that didn't question the nature of 3i Atlas, but its timing. Why now? Why this century, this moment in human history? Was it coincidence that a world drowning in noise and disconnection suddenly received a cosmic silence so profound that it made everyone stop and look upward? Was it random that at the very height of our technological arrogance, when we believed we had measured everything, something arrived that reminded us how little we know? Maybe 3i Atlas was not a messenger or a probe, but a reflection of balance, a universal rhythm reminding us that discovery always comes with humility. As one monk wrote in a letter to an astronomer friend, "The universe doesn't send signs, it sends mirrors. What you see in them depends on how much light you carry." Yet beneath all these speculations, one haunting possibility continued to resurface, the idea that 3i Atlas was not from the universe as we know it, but between it. Some quantum theorists proposed that the object might have slipped through a dimensional fold, a point where space-time intersects itself. A bridge between realities. They cited the irregularities in its spectral data, flashes of light that seemed to defy Doppler effect predictions, as though the object were not just moving through space, but flickering across layers of it. If true, that would mean 3I Atlas wasn't bound by our timeline. It could appear in multiple systems across different eras, like a stone skipping across the surface of a cosmic ocean. One paper, quietly retracted a week after publication, ended with a chilling conclusion. If such objects can traverse dimensional thresholds, then observation itself becomes part of their motion. By seeing it, we may have anchored it here. The idea that our awareness could alter the path of a celestial traveler unsettled even the most rational minds. But perhaps in some strange way, that's what 3I Atlas wanted. Not attention, but acknowledgement. A shared moment between creation and consciousness. And maybe that's what lies beneath all the speculation. Not science, not belief, but longing. The longing to find meaning in the void. Because humanity has always done this, turned uncertainty into story, mystery into myth. It's how we survive the vastness. When the stars refuse to answer, we write answers of our own. And so 3I Atlas became a symbol not of fear, but of possibility. Proof that the unknown still exists, that beyond our equations and algorithms, the universe still keeps secrets too profound for us to grasp. Perhaps one day, when we've grown wiser, we'll meet another traveler like it. Or perhaps we already have. Dad just didn't recognize it for what it was. Until then, 3I Atlas remains our quiet teacher, a mystery that slipped between the boundaries of what we know and what we dare to imagine. And as it drifts ever deeper into the dark, maybe the universe smiles, knowing that in trying to explain it, humanity rediscovered something far greater, the sacred art of wondering. After October 29th, the world felt different. Not visibly, not in ways the eye could see, but quietly, deeply, like a note that continues to vibrate long after the instrument has gone still. The night sky looked the same, yet it wasn't. Humanity had watched something impossible pass through its heavens, and now in its absence, we were left with the echo of questions that no telescope could answer. For some, 3 Atlas was an event that ended when it vanished into the black. For others, it was the beginning of something that will never truly end. Because moments like these don't fade, they expand. They ripple through time, reshaping the way we see ourselves, the way we define possibility, the way we listen to the silence above. And now, in the stillness after its departure, one truth has begun to emerge. The story of 3I Atlas was never about where it came from. It was about where it will lead us. In the months following its disappearance, astronomers noticed something subtle, a shift not in space, but in spirit. Applications for astrophysics programs soared across the globe. Amateur observatories doubled their memberships. Children began drawing comets and galaxies again, asking their parents what lies beyond the stars. Humanity, long distracted by the noise of its own creation, had remembered the oldest impulse of all, to look up and wonder. But science too had changed. Researchers now spoke of post-Atlas thinking, a phrase that described not just a new era of astronomy, but a new philosophy of discovery. Where once scientists sought certainty, they now embraced mystery as a necessary companion to truth. Because if 3I Atlas taught us anything, it's that understanding is not the same as control. The universe isn't something we conquer. It's something we join. There were practical changes too. New space missions were drafted, the Interstellar Object Tracking Program, the Cosmic Drift Initiative, even the ambitious Dark Matter Current project, born from those speculative ideas that had once been dismissed as fantasy. Humanity, for the first time, was preparing to follow, to go beyond the gravitational fence of the solar system and trace the path of travelers like 3I Atlas. But in truth, what drove these projects wasn't curiosity alone. It was longing. The feeling that something had passed us by, and that maybe, if we reached far enough, we might find it again. Meanwhile, across cultures and continents, 3I Atlas became a symbol, not of fear but of awakening. Artists carved its shape into monuments. Poets wrote of its silence. Musicians composed symphonies inspired by its trajectory. movements that rose and fell like the faint heartbeat of the cosmos. And quietly, spiritual leaders began to speak of it as an omen of humility, the universe's way of reminding us that existence isn't random but rhythmic, that everything, from stars to souls, moves in patterns too vast to measure. In the temples of Kyoto, monks painted long arcs across rice paper, each representing the path of a traveler who came and left without a sound. In the deserts of Nevada, stargazers held annual gatherings under the dark sky, marking October 29th as the night of return. They didn't watch for aliens. They simply watched the stars, waiting for the next silence to arrive. And somewhere, deep in a quiet lab in Switzerland, a small plaque now hangs above a telescope's eyepiece. It reads, "Not everything that visits is meant to stay, but everything that visits leaves a trace." Yet even as the years moved forward, scientists couldn't resist one final question. Where is it now? The last known trajectory placed 3I Atlas speeding toward interstellar space at over 30 kilometers per second, faster than any probe humanity has ever built. That means even now, as you hear these words, it continues its journey, further and further into the deep beyond. And while we may never see it again, it will always carry a part of us. Because for those brief weeks Earth watched, humanity noticed, and in that noticing we left our own fingerprint on the universe, a record of our awareness, a spark of shared consciousness written into the cosmic story. Perhaps one day, far in the future, another world will see it. Another civilization will record its strange orbit, puzzle over its composition, feel the same mixture of awe and uncertainty we felt. And they too will ask, what happens after October 29? And maybe they'll sense, as we did, that the question was never meant to be answered. It was meant to awaken. For now, the legacy of 3I Atlas lives not in data, but in direction. It's a reminder that discovery is not a destination, it's a continuum. Each question leads to another. Each mystery pulls us deeper into the fabric of existence. And though we may never find all the answers, perhaps that's the beauty of it, that the universe gives us just enough to keep reaching. Because what is science, if not faith in understanding? And what is faith if not belief that meaning exists, even when unseen? As Dr. Kessler once said in her final interview, we keep thinking we've reached the edge of what we can know. But the universe is patient. It waits for us to look up again. And maybe that's what's next. Not another object, not another revelation, but another chance. Another night when the sky stirs, and a faint glimmer reminds us that even in the darkness, the unknown is alive and moving. So what happens after October 29? The truth is we happen. We who stayed behind. We who watched and wondered. We who changed. Because when something like 3I Atlas passes through your sky, it doesn't leave you the same. It widens your sight, deepens your questions, and rewrites the boundaries of belief. It teaches you that the universe isn't cold or empty. It's vast, yes, but filled with meaning waiting to be seen. It's a living ocean, and we are part of its current. And as long as we keep our eyes open, keep searching, keep asking, what if? What next? What beyond? Then the story continues. Not with comets or instruments, but with us. Humanity's journey doesn't end where 3I Atlas vanished. It begins there. And so, as we close this chapter, one that began with a silent traveler and ended with an awakening, take a moment tonight. Step outside, look up, and let the darkness remind you of how much light you carry inside. Because perhaps the real path ahead isn't written in stars. Perhaps it's written in us. Thank you for joining us on this voyage through mystery, science, and soul. If this story made you feel something, that quiet pull of awe that only the universe can inspire, then you belong here. With us beneath the same endless sky. You've been watching The Sleep Lab, where the universe never rests and neither does curiosity. Don't forget to subscribe, stay awake with wonder, and let your mind keep wandering through the mysteries science has yet to explain. Because somewhere out there, something is still moving, and it might just be looking back.